Today I'll be reviewing Speedball Fabric Block Printing Ink. I was at the store the other day and I saw this kit, and so I thought I would go ahead and pick it up. So traditionally I usually screen print my t-shirts. It's very reliable, fast, great, but every now and then it's fun to block print a shirt if you've got a nice design. Carving's different, and so this kit's got our primary colors, yellow, red, and blue, and then we've got black and white, and so you can pretty much mix any of the colors. We've also got green. I'm not quite sure what's up with that, but I guess people really like green and they don't want to mix green, so there's that. And I also have a tube of gold fabric ink from my gold ink roundup. And right out of the box, you can see that these tubes are a little small. Well, I should say that if I was printing onto paper, this set of ink could probably last me like years, but that's not the case with this ink, and we'll touch upon that later. Next up, I'm going to talk a little bit about my linoleum. So here I'm using Easy Carve. So this stuff is super soft, very rubbery, doesn't like to be run through the press. And I'm using Easy Carve because one, it's what they advertise on the box, and two, I imagine the type of person looking into this product doesn't really have a big studio, is probably a DIY person, and probably doesn't have a press. And so I feel like Easy Carve is going to be perfect for those people. And so what I've got ready is a little 2-color print. And so it's going to be a color layer and then a kind of a black key layer on top. And so what's nice is these containers are foil sealed, so I guess I'm not too worried about it leaking in the box, although ink can always leak in the box depending on how badly your mail company wrecks your boxes. And right off the bat, mixing this ink around with the ink knife, I noticed that it feels gritty. Like whenever it feels like there's a bunch of sand in there or something, like really fine particles of sand. It didn't look like it scratched my glass slab or anything like that, but it just had a weird texture that I couldn't quite figure out. And it's not a sort of like a gritty texture that's like in their Speedball Professional line or their normal Speedball oil based line, so it must be something special that helps it adhere to fabric. But not a big deal, but something interesting that I noted, and something I don't want you to kind of freak out about the first time you experience it. So this ink, super loose. I would say it rolls out very easily. Probably something a home user would like. You're gonna roll up your blocks really fast. Shouldn't have any problems having this ink transfer over to your fabric or anything like that. And so here I'm getting 2 colors ready. I want to print the red layer and then the black layer right on top. And here I'm rolling on my ink a little bit thicker than I would with paper. Actually, it's a lot thicker than I would on paper. I don't know if you can notice it, but my brayer has some texture. It's like orange peel skin on the side of my brayer. And I'm going to apply my ink very thickly. Like it should be a very visible thick layer of ink on there. Also, a quick aside, for my registration system, basically I've got my shirt kind of stretched over this rectangular platen here, and I've got a line of masking tape across this way, and then I've kind of got this T-square with also a line of masking tape on it, and I've got this like evenly spaced grid system on here. And basically I'm just going to use this little like tick mark on my T and bar square to be lined up with one corner of my image, and I'm just going to basically do that, and that's how I'm going to register the prints into a grid format. It's a very similar thing that yardage printers do. And first print down, it's not bad. I see that I missed a little corner there, and so one thing that I'm really not going to talk about too much in this video, but you can spritz your fabric with a little bit of water, just lightly, not soaking it, and that will help your ink kind of stick into the fabric and get a much more rich print. But today I'm just kind of testing the colors and how well it sticks. I'm not really trying to get a really finished work of art. Also, you might notice that my image is very simplistic. With the looser ink also means that it is harder to get a lot of detail with your image, just because those lines will have a tendency to fill in when you're squishing around the Easy Carve. And so pretty much I'm just going to do all the colors of the rainbow: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, no indigo, and violet, and then gold. And I'm also printing onto a black shirt just to see kind of how this ink has opacity and how well it shows up on black fabric, because it's good to know, what it's capable of. And as you can see as I go through the prints here, I decided that I'm going to print all the colors first and then come back in to print the black layer. I was going to print color, then black, right one after another, but I found that the ink dries super fast on my slab. Basically, if I rolled out a block and print one of these solid colors, when I come back to the slab, all the ink on the slab is just kind of like dry. It's not like dry to the touch or anything like that, but it's like hard to work with, hard to roll out. It's kind of dry and clumpy, and so I decided that I'm just going to do the colors first. And I think that's the main drawback of this ink. I think it has to do something with the water solubleness of this ink, because none of my other inks really do that except for my water soluble Speedball inks. But it's something that I would say, if you're printing with this, I would say expect to kind of squeeze a little bit more ink out of the tube every time you make a print. I think so you're going to go through this tube pretty fast because you're going to have to refresh the slab every single time you go to ink up. Here's me having some fun on a mid-toned colored shirt, and this one I just kind of mixed like a little cardboard brown, inked up a piece of cardboard, and then kind of imprinted it onto the shirt. And so that's what we've got here. You can kind of see that the little flutes in the cardboard made little pressure differentials and made this weird little pattern here. So we're gonna see how that holds up in the wash. Here's one on white fabric, no dampened fabric, and you can see that all the colors printed pretty nicely. I inked it up a little bit heavy, but all the colors show up on the white fabric really well. Pardon the little bits of misregistration, but here we've got this print here, and of course you can see I kind of get a bit of a more solid print when multiple layers kind of stack up on top of each other. I just think that since it's not trying to work overtime and really get deep into the weave of the fabric, it can just kind of sit a little bit more opaque on a second layer. But for the most part, all of the colors are pretty nice. The blue was just a little bit under inked. As for the black fabric, you can see that the inks are rather opaque. You can see here I've tried doing some bleach experiments onto the shirt too, and that bleach will take the dye out of the shirt, but it doesn't really affect the printing ink very much. And so you can have some fun kind of printing an image and then kind of bleaching out the color of the fabric and just kind of make an extra color in your layers. And so that's super cool. I'm really glad that the relief ink will do that for you. But for the most part, ink's pretty opaque. Just layer it on pretty thick and you'll be good. And so I'm about to do a wash test for these shirts just to see how well the inks hold up in the wash. And here on this orange shirt, I'm trying a bunch of different inks. And so I'm just trying normal, Speedball, water miscible, professional ink, the Speedball Fabric, and then just kind of things like Gamblin, Hanco, Cranfield, water miscible, traditional Cranfield, Charbonnel etching ink, Gamblin's specifically made textile ink, Hawthorne Stay Open ink, and then just some Van Son rubber based ink. And so we're going to see how well these hold up in the wash. All of these were printed on this shirt and were given 7 days to dry. I could see that the water miscible inks, when I kind of rub my finger on them, they still kind of transfer ink a little bit, whereas when I touch the traditional inks, non-water miscible, none of that ink rubs onto my finger. And so not really having high hopes for just non-fabric water miscible inks. And again, all of these inks were given 7 days to just air dry. No heat setting, no iron, nothing like that. And then with this wash test, I'm also just going to throw in a screen printed shirt just for reference. This one was printed with Green Galaxy water-based ink, and it looks and feels like a screen printed shirt. That little fade from the red to the pink is not low ink. That was just kind of like a red to pink split fountain. Now with any graphic printed t-shirt, you should always want to wash it inside out to protect the print, but I'm going to simulate worst case scenario. So I'm going to use hot water, a lot of laundry detergent, and just kind of throw it in there print side out to simulate wear and tear. And let's face it, the average user is not going to take all of that care every time they do their laundry, and so I want to see what happens when your users are rough with their shirts. And just after the first wash, taking a peek at the shirts. First shirt here, this was Speedball Fabric based ink, and that looks pretty much just like the day I printed it, and so no worries there. White shirt actually seems to be pretty fine. I was actually worried about this one fading a lot. Usually when the white cotton fibers just kind of get washed, if you don't pre-wash it, just kind of, get a little fuzzy and the print just kind of gets a little like drowned out in the fuzz. But this one is looking good so far. That print looks just as crisp as the day it went in. Same with the black shirt. It looks like these prints stayed pretty crispy. I'm surprised that nothing's happened to them yet, and so good job. Speedball Fabric ink on black shirts. With the shirt of random different inks, that result is much more interesting. And so here we can see that Speedball Professional non-fabric ink is already quite faded, and we can also see that Cranfield water miscible ink is also quite faded. And so it's just a little unfortunate that the two water miscible inks didn't quite survive the wash as well. The Speedball one a little bit more worse for wear, but the interesting thing is that all of the other oil-based inks from different brands seem to be working out just fine and haven't really faded much with this print. And then of course the screen printed shirt looks like you would expect for a screen printed shirt. Colors are pretty much exactly the same, no worse for wear, doesn't really feel any different. Good old screen printing. And for the drying cycle, again, I'm just gonna toss it in there, print side out, hot air, nothing too fancy, probably what most of us do to our laundry anyway. And so after the wash dry cycle, it looks like Speedball Fabric ink holding up pretty well. That's pretty much exactly how it went in, and so I'd be pretty confident this is gonna last quite a few wash dry cycles. But where I initially noted that it looked like the black layer was printing more solidly where it overlapped the first layer, it looks like now the black layer is more solid where it's just touching the bare fabric, and the overlapped areas are a little bit more faded. And so I would have my reservations on stacking this ink a little too high. Maybe, the more layers you have on there, the less it kind of sticks to it. It looks like this ink kind of wants to stick more to the bare fabric than another layer of ink. And so 2 layers so far, this seems to work just fine. I might be a little bit worried if I were going to stack like 5 or 6 layers on top of each other. As for the black t-shirt, uneven printing aside, it looks like the inks that I put down have stayed relatively constant, and so that's pretty good to know. I think I would have confidence running this through many wash dry cycles. But back to this orange shirt, you can see that Speedball Professional water miscible and Cranfield water miscible faded both quite a bit with their wash dry cycle. I've run it through a few more wash dry cycles since this, and they have faded even more, although they're still ghostly there, and any of the other inks have pretty much stayed at full richness. And that kind of brings me to the conclusion of this video. Do I recommend that you buy Speedball Fabric water miscible ink? And in general, I would probably say no, unless you're a very specific person, which I'll elaborate in a bit. But the main thing I don't like is that it just dries a little too fast on the slab. It makes it a little hard to work with, at least compared to the inks that I'm used to working with. But as you can see, if you just have any oil-based ink that's not water miscible, all of those prints print solidly and they hold up in the wash as long as you let it dry for like 7 days. And so I would say don't buy a new ink if you already have inks. But I do see a very specific use case for this ink, and that is that it's the only water miscible ink that sticks to fabric. And so if you absolutely need an ink that you can clean up with soap and water, this is actually your only choice. Now, I've talked a few times on this channel that, in my personal opinion, I prefer traditional oil-based inks because it doesn't dry on your slab, you get more time to work with things, and cleaning it up, you don't actually need harmful solvents like mineral spirits to clean them up. You can actually just clean it up with vegetable oil or baby oil and then degrease it with household cleaners like 409 or Dawn dish soap and water. You don't actually need solvents to clean it up. But I actually find that in very certain situations, having a water miscible ink is actually really nice and handy to have. And I would say those situations are when I'm doing live printing or print events with other people around. And so if I do a live printing event where I just kind of have a table and a station set up and I'm just letting people print, sometimes people get ink on their fingers. You know, printmaking is pretty messy. And you know, if it's a traditional oil-based ink, well, I always wear gloves to clean it up, and I kind of need a really powerful soap to kind of scrub my hands clean. But with the water miscible inks, I could just use a wet rag and have people clean their hands like that. And so I don't have to send them to the bathroom or anything like that. We can just clean up. Cleaning your hands is super simple. The same with kids, you know, it's kind of hard to get kids to clean their hands, and so having a ink that can just kind of clean up with soap and water in the sink is way easier for events with children and the like that, even though the printing part of that is a lot harder than traditional oil-based inks. And so I can see for cases like that, I absolutely want a water miscible ink. And so if you've been watching this footage, you can see that just plain water and a little bit of dish soap is really cleaning up this part of the slab quite immaculately. And you can see here I'm using some mineral spirits to clean up a different brayer with the same Speedball fabric ink on it, and I would say that the mineral spirits cleans about equally as fast as the Dawn dish soap and water, which is quite cool to hear. So for cleanup in general, I usually recommend just using your ink knife to scrape up the excess ink first and then start cleaning with your solvents or your dish soap. But for this last pile, we're going to pretend that I don't have an ink knife and I'm just going to try and clean up the slab. Well, just water and Dawn dish soap, as you can see, and some elbow grease will clean this spot up just fine. If you were trying to clean up oil-based ink without scraping it up first, you'd be scrubbing at it for, you know, a little bit more time than this. And so it's really cool to see how easily this cleans up. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something new. Printing on fabric can be a lot more forgiving than you think. If anything, just try your ink on a scrap shirt and just see what happens. I think the main things to keep in mind are that you can spritz your shirt with water to get a much richer ink transfer, and to make sure that your shirt has at least around like 7 days or so to dry to get that ink to really kind of dry and bond to the fabric. Other than that, printing on shirts is pretty forgiving. Hopefully in the future, I'll get the chance to review some more things, maybe some inks, maybe some printmaking related equipment, maybe some presses, who knows. So subscribe, maybe I'll put out another video you're interested in. Until next time, keep on printing, with this time on fabric.